"I am grateful to you for your interest in me," said Prince Bahman, "and for the advice you have given, though I cannot follow it. But what dangers can there be in the adventure which courage and a good sword cannot meet?" "And suppose," answered the dervish, "that your enemies are invisible, what then?" "Nothing will make me give it up," replied the prince, "and for the last time I ask you to tell me where I am to go." When the dervish saw that the prince's mind was made up, he drew a ball from a bag that lay near him and held it out. "If it must be so," he said with a sigh, "take this, and when you have mounted your horse, throw the ball in front of you. It will roll on till it reaches the foot of a mountain, and when it stops, you will stop also. You will then throw the bridle on your horse's neck without any fear of his straying, and dismount. On each side you will see vast heaps of big black stones, and will hear a multitude of insulting voices, but pay no heed to them, and above all, beware of ever turning your head. If you do, you will instantly become a black stone like the rest. For those stones are in reality men like yourself, who have been on the same quest and have failed, and I fear you will fail also. If you manage to avoid this pitfall and reach the top of the mountain, you will find there the talking bird in a splendid cage, and you can ask him where you are to seek the singing tree and the golden water. That is all I have to say. You know what you have to do and what to avoid, but if you are wise you will think of it no more, but return whence you have come." The prince smilingly shook his head and, thanking the dervish once more, sprang on his horse and threw the ball before him. The ball rolled along the road so fast that Prince Bahman had difficulty keeping up with it, and it never relaxed its speed till the foot of the mountain was reached. Then it came to a sudden halt, and the prince at once got down and flung the bridle on his horse's neck. He paused for a moment and looked around him at the masses of black stones with which the sides of the mountain were covered, and then began resolutely to ascend. He had hardly gone 4 steps when he heard the sound of voices around him, although no other creature was in sight. "Who is this imbecile?" cried some. "Stop him at once." Kill him, shrieked others. "Help, robbers, murderers, help, help." "Oh, look at him, alone," sneered another, and this was the most trying of all. "He's such a beautiful young man. I'm sure the bird in the cage must have been kept for him." At first the prince took no heed of all this clamour, but continued to press forward on his way. Unfortunately, this conduct, instead of silencing the voices, only seemed to irritate them the more, and they arose with redoubled fury, in front as well as behind. After some time he grew bewildered, his knees began to tremble, and finding himself in the act of falling, he forgot altogether the advice of the dervish. He turned to fly down the mountain, and in one moment became a black stone. As may be imagined, Prince Perviz and his sister were all this time in the greatest anxiety, and consulted the magic knife not once, but multiple times a day. Hitherto the blade had remained bright and spotless, but on the fatal hour when Prince Bahman and his horse were changed into black stones, large drops of blood appeared on the surface. "Oh, my beloved brother," cried the princess in horror, throwing the knife from her. "I shall never see you again, and it is I who have killed you." Fool that I was to listen to the voice of that temptress, who was probably not speaking the truth. What are the talking bird and singing tree to me in comparison with you, passionately though I long for them? Prince Perviz's grief was not less than that of Princess Parizade, but he did not waste his time on useless lamentations. "My sister," he said, "why should you think that the old woman was deceiving you about these treasures? And what would have been her object in doing so? No, our brother must have met his death by some accident or want of precaution. And tomorrow I will start on the same quest." Terrified at the thought that she might lose her only remaining brother, the princess entreated him to give up his project, but he remained firm. Before setting out, however, he gave her a chaplet of 100 pearls and said, "When I am absent, tell this over daily for me. But if you should find that the beads stick so that they will not slip one after the other, you will know that my brother's fate has befallen me. Still, we must hope for better luck." Then he departed, and on the 20th day of his journey fell in with the dervish on the same spot as Prince Bahman had met him, and began to question him as to the place where the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water were to be found. As in the case of his brother, the dervish tried to make him give up his project, and even told him that only a few weeks since a young man, bearing a strong resemblance to himself, had passed that way, but had never come back again. That, holy dervish, replied Prince Perviz, was my elder brother, who is now dead, though how he died I cannot say. He is changed into black stone, answered the dervish, like all the rest who have gone on the same errand, and you will likely become one likewise if you are not more careful in following my directions. Then he charged the prince, as he valued his life, to take no heed of the clamour of voices that would pursue him up the mountain, and handing him a ball from the bag, which still seemed to be half full, he sent him on his way. When Prince Perviz reached the foot of the mountain, he jumped from his horse and paused for a moment to recall the instructions the dervish had given him. Then he strode boldly on, but had scarcely gone 5 or 6 paces when he was startled by a man's voice that seemed close to his ear, exclaiming, "Stop, rash fellow, and let me punish your audacity." This outrage entirely put the dervish's advice out of the prince's head. He drew his sword and turned to avenge himself, but almost before he realized that there was nobody there, he and his horse were 2 black stones. Not a morning had passed since Prince Perviz had ridden away without Princess Parizade, telling her beads, and at night she even hung them around her neck, so if she woke she could assure herself at once of her brother's safety. She was in the very act of moving them between her fingers at the moment when the prince fell a victim to his impatience, and her heart sank when the first pearl remained fixed in its place. However, she had long made up her mind what she would do in such a case, and the following morning the princess, dressed as a man, set out for the mountain. As she had been accustomed to riding from her childhood, she managed to travel as many miles daily as her brothers had done, and it was, as before, on the 20th day that she arrived at the place where the dervish was sitting. "Good dervish," she said politely, "will you allow me to rest by you for a few moments? And perhaps you will be so kind as to tell me if you have ever heard of a talking bird, a singing tree, and some golden water that are to be found somewhere near here." "Madam," replied the dervish, "for in spite of your manly dress your voice betrays you, I shall be proud to serve you in any way I can. But may I ask the purpose of your question?" "Good dervish," answered the princess, "I have heard such glowing descriptions of these 3 things that I cannot rest until I possess them." "Madam," said the dervish, "they are far more beautiful than any description, but you seem ignorant of all the difficulties that stand in your way, or you would hardly have undertaken such an adventure. Give it up, I pray you, and return home. Do not ask me to help you to a cruel death." "Holy father," answered the princess, "I have come from far, and I should be in despair if I turned back without having attained my object. You have spoken of difficulties. Tell me, I entreat you, what are they, so that I might know if I can overcome them, or to see whether they are beyond my strength." So the dervish repeated his tale, and dwelt more firmly than before on the clamour of the voices, the horrors of the black stones which were once living men, and the difficulties of climbing the mountain, pointing out that the chief means of success was to never look behind you till you had the cage in your grasp. "As far as I can see," said the princess, "the first thing is not to mind the tumult of the voices that follow you till you reach the cage, and then never to look back. As to this, I think I have enough self-control to look straight before me. But as it is quite possible I might be frightened by the voices, as even the boldest men have been, I will stop up my ears with cotton, so that, let them make as much noise as they like, I shall hear nothing." "Madam," cried the dervish, "out of all the number who have asked me the way to the mountain, you are the first who has ever suggested such a means of escaping the danger. It is possible that you may succeed, but all the same the risk is great." "Good dervish," answered the princess, "I feel in my heart that I shall succeed, and it only remains for me to ask you the way I am to go." Then the dervish knew it was useless to say more, and he gave her the ball which she flung before her. The first thing the princess did on arriving at the mountain was to stop her ears with cotton, and then, making up her mind which was the best way to go, she began her ascent. In spite of the cotton, some echoes of the voices reached her ears, but not so as to trouble her. Indeed, though they grew louder and more insulting the higher she climbed, the princess only laughed and said to herself that she certainly would not let a few rough words stand between her and her goal. At last she perceived in the distance the cage and the bird, whose voice joined itself in tones of thunder to those of the rest. "Return, return! Never dare to come near me!" At the sight of the bird, the princess hastened her steps, and without vexing herself at the noise, which by this time had grown deafening, she walked straight up to the cage. Seizing it, she said, "Now, my bird, I have got you, and I shall take great care that you do not escape." As she spoke, she took the cotton from her ears, because it was no longer needed. "Brave lady," answered the bird, "do not blame me for having joined my voice to those who did their best to preserve my freedom. Although confined in a cage, I was content with my lot. But if I must become a slave, I could not wish for a nobler mistress than one who has shown me so much constancy. And from this moment I swear to serve you faithfully. Some day you will put me to the proof, for I know who you are better than you do yourself. Meanwhile, tell me what I can do, and I will obey you." "Bird," replied the princess, who was filled with a joy that seemed strange to herself when she thought that the bird had cost her the lives of both her brothers. "Bird, let me first thank you for your goodwill, and then let me ask you where the golden water is to be found." The bird described the place, which was not far distant, and the princess filled a small silver flask that she had brought with her for the purpose. Then she returned to the cage and said, "Bird, there is still something else. Where will I find the singing tree?" "Behind you in that wood," replied the bird, and the princess wandered through the wood until a sound of the sweetest voices told her that she had found what she sought. But the tree was tall and strong, and it was hopeless to think of uprooting it. "You need not do that," said the bird when she had returned to ask counsel. "Break off a twig and plant it in your garden. It will take root and grow into a magnificent tree." When the Princess Parizade held in her hands the three wonders promised to her by the old woman, she said to the bird, "All that is not enough. It was owing to you that my brothers became black stones. I cannot tell them from the mass of others, but you must know, so point them out to me, I beg you, for I wish to carry them away." For some reason that the princess could not guess, these words seemed to displease the bird, and he did not answer. The princess waited a moment, and then continued in severe tones, "Have you forgotten that you yourself said you are my slave to do my bidding, and also that your life is in my power?" "No, I have not forgotten," replied the bird, "but what you ask is very difficult. However, I will do my best. If you look around," he said, "you will see a pitcher standing near. Take it, and as you go down the mountain, scatter a little of the water it contains over every black stone. You will soon find your two brothers." Princess Parizade took the pitcher, and carrying it with the cage, the twig, and the flask, returned down the mountainside. At every black stone she stopped and sprinkled it with water, and as the water touched it, the stone instantly became a man. When she suddenly saw her brothers, her delight was mixed with astonishment. "Why, what are you doing here?" she cried. "We've been asleep," they said. "Yes," returned the princess, "but without me your sleep would probably have lasted till the day of judgment. Have you forgotten that you came here in search of the talking bird, the singing tree, and the golden water, and all the black stones that were heaped up along the road? Look around and see if there is one left. These gentlemen, yourselves, and all your horses were changed into these stones, and I have delivered you by sprinkling you with the water from this pitcher. As I could not return home without you, even though I had gained the prizes on which I had set my heart, I forced the talking bird to tell me how to break the spell." On hearing these words, Prince Bahman and Prince Perviz understood all they owed their sister, and the knights who stood by declared themselves her slaves, and ready to carry out her wishes. But the princess, while thanking them for their politeness, explained she wished for no company but her brothers, and the rest were free to go where they would. So saying, the princess mounted her horse, and, declining to allow even Prince Bahman to carry the cage with the talking bird, she entrusted him with a branch of the singing tree, while Prince Perviz took care of the flask containing the golden water. Then they rode away, followed by the knights and gentlemen, who begged to be permitted to escort them. It had been the intention of the party to stop and tell their adventures to the dervish, but they found to their sorrow that he was dead. Whether from old age or from feeling that his task was done, they never knew. As they continued their road, their numbers grew daily smaller, for the knights turned off one by one to their own homes, and only the brothers and sister finally drew up at the gates of the palace. The princess carried the cage straight into the garden. As soon as the bird began to sing, nightingales, larks, thrushes, finches, and all sorts of other birds mingled their voices in chorus. The branch she planted in the corner near the house, and in a few days it had grown into a great tree. As for the golden water, it was poured into a great marble basin specially prepared for it, and it swelled and bubbled and then shot up into the air in a fountain 20 feet high. The fame of these wonders soon spread abroad, and people came from far and near to see and admire. After a few days, Prince Bahman and Prince Perviz fell back into their ordinary way of life, and passed most of their time hunting. One day it happened that the Sultan of Persia was also hunting in the same direction, and, not wishing to interfere with his sport, the young men, on hearing the noise of the hunt approaching, prepared to retire. But as luck would have it, they turned down the very path which the Sultan was coming. They threw themselves from their horses and prostrated themselves to the earth, but the Sultan was curious to see their faces and commanded them to rise. The princes stood up respectfully but quite at their ease, and the Sultan looked at them for a few moments without speaking. Then he asked who they were and where they lived. "Sire," replied Prince Bahman, "we are sons of your Highness's late intendant of the gardens, and we live in a house that he built a short time before his death, waiting till an occasion should offer itself to serve your Highness." "You seem fond of hunting," answered the Sultan. "Sire," replied Prince Bahman, "it is our usual exercise, and one that should be neglected by no man who expects to comply with the ancient customs of the kingdom and bear arms." The Sultan was delighted with this remark, and said at once, "In that case, I shall take great pleasure in watching you. Come choose what sort of beasts you would like to hunt." The princes jumped on their horses and followed the Sultan at a little distance. They had not gone very far before they saw a number of wild animals appear at once. Prince Bahman gave chase to a lion, and Prince Perviz to a bear. Both used their javelins with such skill that directly they arrived within striking range, the lion and the bear fell, pierced through and through. As they were making ready for their third assault, the Sultan interfered, and sending one of his officials to summon them, said smiling, "If I let you go on, there will be no beasts left to hunt. Besides, your courage and manners have so won my heart that I will not have you expose yourselves to further danger. I am convinced that some day or other I shall find you useful as well as agreeable." He then gave them a warm invitation to stay with him altogether, but with many thanks for the honour done them, they begged to be excused and to be suffered to remain at home. The Sultan, who was not accustomed to see his offers rejected, inquired their reasons, and Prince Bahman explained that they did not wish to leave their sister, and were accustomed to do nothing without consulting all three together. The two princes returned home, but their adventure made so little impression on them that they quite forgot to speak to their sister on the subject. The next morning, when they went out to hunt, they met the Sultan in the same place, and he inquired what advice their sister had given. The young men looked at each other and blushed. At last Prince Bahman said, "Sire, we must throw ourselves on your Highness's mercy. Neither my brother nor myself remembered anything about it." "Then be sure you do not forget today," answered the Sultan, "and bring me your reply tomorrow." When, however, the same thing happened a second time, they feared that the Sultan might be angry with them for their carelessness. But he took it in good part, and drawing 3 little balls from his purse, held them out to Prince Bahman, saying, "Put these in your bosom, and you will not forget a third time. For when you remove your girdle tonight, the noise they will make in falling will remind you of my wishes." It all happened as the Sultan had foreseen, and the two brothers appeared in their sister's apartments just as she was in the act of stepping into bed, and told their tale. The Princess Parizade was much disturbed at the news, and did not conceal her feelings. "Your meeting with the Sultan is very honourable to you," she said, "and I will, dare say, be of service to you, but it places me in a very awkward position. It is on my account, I know, that you have resisted the Sultan's wishes, and I am very grateful to you for it. But kings do not like to have their offers refused, and in time he would bear a grudge against you, which would render me very unhappy. Consult the talking bird, who is wise and far-seeing, and let me hear what he says." So the bird was sent for, and the case laid before him. "The princes must on no account refuse the Sultan's proposal," said he, "and they must even invite him to come and see your house." "But bird," objected the princess, "you know how dearly we love each other. Will this not all spoil our friendship?" "Not at all," replied the bird. "It will make it all the closer." "Then the Sultan will have to see me," said the princess. The bird answered that it was necessary that he should see her, and that everything would turn out for the best. The following morning, when the Sultan inquired if they had spoken with their sister, and what advice she had given them, Prince Bahman replied that they were ready to agree to His Highness's wishes, and that their sister had reproved them for their hesitation about the matter. The Sultan received their excuses with great kindness, and told them he was sure they would be equally faithful to him, and kept them by his side for the rest of the day, to the vexation of the Grand Vizier and the rest of the court. When the procession entered the gates of the capital, the eyes of the people who crowded the streets were fixed on the two young men, strangers to everyone. "Oh, if only the Sultan had had sons like that," they murmured. "They look so distinguished and are about the same age as his sons would have been." The Sultan commanded that splendid apartments should be prepared for the two brothers, and insisted that they should sit at the table with him. During dinner he led the conversation to various scientific subjects, and also to history, of which he was especially fond. But whatever topic they might be discussing, he found the views of the young men were always worth listening to. "If they were my own sons," he said to himself, "they could not be better educated." Aloud he complimented them on their learning and taste for knowledge. At the end of the evening the princes once more prostrated themselves before the throne and asked leave to return home. And then, encouraged by the gracious words of farewell uttered by the Sultan, Prince Bahrain said, "Sire, may we dare take the liberty of asking whether you would do us and our sister the honour of resting for a few minutes at our house the first time the hunt passes by that way?" "With the utmost pleasure," replied the Sultan, "and as I am all impatience to see the sister of such accomplished young men, you may expect me the day after tomorrow." See you tomorrow.